Thanks again, Popgun and Falco. Wonderful job casting that first set. It was a blast. I think that we ought to start talking about our next set, which is the set of the week. It will be Alliance Rogue versus Graveyard Shift, an EU versus EU battle. I'm definitely looking forward to this match, especially after both teams look strong in week one, especially Alliance Rogue.
Yeah, I mean, Alliance Rogue from qualifiers, they didn't drop a game. And then last week, just dropping a single game, I believe, in their last match. So Alliance Rogue has looked very dominant no matter who that fourth player was. It was Fuzzy in the qualifiers. It was Volty here during the league. And honestly, it's very interesting to see how they've adapted to playing with Volty, a more aggressive up-tempo style that, they weren't known for really in the past, as they were switching around that fourth member to complement Scar, Kiver, and Gray. But a lot to look forward to in this match. And honestly, I said this before, not only is this our match of the week, I think this might be the match of the entire league. I think these two teams are that close.
Yeah, it feels like we're slowly, almost intentionally, schedule-wise, moving towards these super close matchups like Walkie's talking about. Next week we're going to have the Jackpot and Crush Soda, and ideally the Starburst and AR match. But as mentioned, this is EU versus EU. I'm super interested to see how these two teams, who are sort of more so on equal footing from a regional perspective, go up against each other. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, it's yet another 1-0 versus 0-1 team matchup. And for Graveyard Shift, this is very much a proving moment for them. If they can pull off the win here against AR, bring their record back to an even 1-1, and then head into week 3 with that sort of momentum and confidence, I think it will do wonders for them.
Yeah, certainly. With this league format, it is a round robin 4-team format, so very unforgiving in terms of what you have to win in order to make the playoffs. After playing Starburst in week 1, which I think it's a death sentence for anyone who gets assigned Starburst group, you're kind of assuming a loss at that point. But Graveyard Shift did manage to take a game, I believe. So they've certainly shown that they're strong. And moreover, the winner of this set, if Alliance Rogue wins, they have 2 wins and will make the playoffs. If Graveyard Shift wins, they have a shot at making the playoffs, and then it all comes down to week 3, what happens with Alliance Rogue and Starburst, I believe. So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at the Match of the Week video, which includes an interview from both of the teams. One of my favorite parts is seeing a little bit of personality from both of the teams, see what they're expecting going into this week. It will be very interesting to see what these teams are thinking going into this next match.
This is really all you need to know in terms of numbers about AR as a team. 100% in Splat Zones, 100% in Tower Control, 100% in Rainmaker, and 100% in Clam Blitz.
I would say AR is a very aggressive team for now. It used to be kind of passive back then, but now we are actually very aggressive since we play with Volty, Scar, and myself, who are kind of aggressive. And also Gray is kind of the backbone of the team. He's able to stay alive most of the time. He's a great leader, honestly. He knows how to flex multiple weapons. He's great.
Okay, everyone was sitting here going, oh, it's going to be an 0-2, oh, it's going to be an 0-4. 0 for 11 caster predictions earlier this afternoon, but Graveyard Shift is trying to defy those odds.
For Graveyard Shift, I'm basically the one who's just going to paint around for my teammates, especially my Slayers, Orion and Ceres, and I basically try to help them finish kills with Burst Bomb, etc.
Going into this match, we're going to be seeing a face-off between the two players you just saw interviewed, Kiver and Obito. this is certainly a matchup we've been wanting to see. I feel like us on this side of the pond, we don't get to see the EU v EU matchup all too often, especially at this high a level. We are going to be seeing the Kiver versus Obito stats, which we compiled over the last week or two from the qualifiers as well as week 1. How do these players stack up against each other?
Yeah, I mean, Kiver and Obito, let's take a look at the stats page for the both of them. They're both such amazing players, and obviously Obito feeling like he's one of the best, or if not the best, in the game right now. Let's see if the stats support him or do they not. I mean, looking at it right here, you can see Kiver gets the edge in most of the stats for both of these teams, but I think something to really keep an eye out for the both of them is that neither of them really dies that much. They really are always alive for their team. To see both of them with 0.7 deaths per minute, coming in on the lesser side. I believe that's tied for second or third lowest overall among all the players during the qualifiers. So great showings from the both of them to stay alive and really be kind of those anchors for their teams, while also providing, some killing support.
Yeah, I think at their best, Obito can very much be an anchor player, not in the sense of the distance of their weapon that they play, but very much sort of the backbone of a team like Graveyard Shift. Obviously it looks like from a deaths per minute perspective, that took a dramatic tick up from the qualifier into the league itself during week 1. And I'm going to be looking for that to go down in an ideal world where Graveyard Shift, sometimes known as Graffiard a Hift in previous tournaments, if they want to stand a chance against Alliance Rogue. And in this 1v1 matchup specifically, you can see Obito favoring that Neo Splash, having the option to use the triple ink strike to sort of place those little tornadoes of ink, whereas Kiver mostly opting for the vanilla splash. And in reviewing the VOD for week 1, didn't see a lot of, for instance, the special charge up on the mains for their kit, or for the way that they play the vanilla splash. It's more so the consistently offensive output. And I think that shows up in both KDA and also even in splats per minute, where they led in the qualifier but dropped a little bit during their first week in the league.
Yeah, certainly. The league is an entirely different atmosphere, totally different skill level in general from the rest of the qualifier. I think that teams are both rethinking their strategy, rethinking their weapons, and are going to have a more difficult time in general. I think it's also worth pointing out the difference in their kits. Like you said, Obito playing that more supportive style. We also see the Inkzuka splatter shot coming out from his side, which is certainly a valuable tool that we saw quite a bit get used last week to target, say, Rainmakers and get stray picks when they were needed. I think that with that, how do you all feel about this new and improved Alliance Rogue team coming into this week? Like Kiver said, he feels much more comfortable with the skill level of the team at this time than he has in the past. They have a brand new logo, and they are certainly looking to put up a hell of a fight.
There's more to the match of the week video coming up right here.
What do you think about Obito saying and claiming that he's the best player in the world?
He has to prove it. Because if you don't win tournaments or you don't consistently make good results, you cannot call yourself the best. That's what I'm going to say.
I still think I'm the best player in the world, but it wasn't in an arrogant way. It's just that I'm really confident about my gameplay. That's it. Kiver is not my rival because we don't have the same level, but back then he was my idol from Splatoon 1, and I really appreciate him as a person. He's a really good friend of mine.
When we play together, it's okay, but as soon as you become my opponent, for me, you're just an enemy. Friendship or anything, nah, there's nothing like that. That's simple. If you are my enemy, I have to beat you anyway, so there's no friendship in competition.
Throw out your expectations. throw out your 1 seeds and your 4 seeds. None of that matters anymore. When you're in a high pressure environment like this, it all comes down to your mindfulness on the night to night. And Graveyard Shift is looking like they might be giving Starburst a run for their money.
Yes, I want to add that my team doesn't want me to play Machine for some reason, but so I'm just gonna go Splash. But if I would go Machine, it would be an easy 2-0, and I'm not joking. So I predict like 2-1 for us, because I think if they are playing good, it should be 2-1. I wish them a lot of luck, and I hope it's gonna be a good match.
That might have been one of the most dominating comebacks I've ever seen. Losing game 1 to not even losing a point game 2.
Don't be scared, because I know Obito wants to play Machine and his team doesn't let him or anything, but don't be scared. I know Zeros is not there, but play your best, honestly, because we will play our best, and if you're scared, you're gonna lose 4. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, thank you for that. Don't be scared, don't blink, or you'll miss it. This is going to be a very high-level match. You can see the level of respect that both of these players and both of these teams have for each other. They know that if they slip up, the other team is going to take it. A lot of respect for each other, but Obito hyping himself up, trying to make the most out of this opportunity to take on his former idol, I'd say. And it's going to be one hell of a match. Who do you guys have just as a first thought going into this?
I mean, for me, it's gotta be. I mean, everybody saw the caster predictions for the most part. I'm gonna have to go with Alliance Rogue. You know, they've been tested throughout their time in the qualifiers and leagues, and I mean, they haven't missed a step yet, and I don't expect them to do so today. But like I said, this is their toughest matchup to this point. Graveyard Shift, I think, is going to put up a great battle between them. I think this might be the first game that goes to all 3 sets.
Yeah, it almost feels like from the interview especially that maybe Graveyard Shift, from what we heard from Obito, is perhaps handicapping themselves a little bit in terms of, not allowing their players to sort of play what they want, whether it be meta or not. Not that Sloshing Machine isn't meta, but with the confidence that Kiver exudes for the members of Alliance Rogue, I think that permeates and is an extension of how the team as a whole feels. I think they, as Walkie said, they have a new logo, they have Volti. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting matchups that we didn't just cover in terms of not even Kiver versus Obito, but Volti versus Orion is going to be another very, very fun matchup to watch. Those sort of closely knit playstyles of high aggression, the Carbon Roller versus Orion Star Tetris. Very excited to see this one play out. However, I would agree Alliance Rogue has to be considered the favorite for this one.
Yeah, certainly. I think Volti is certainly a player worth pointing out here. One of the only roller players at high level, and Volti has certainly done a lot of damage teaming up with Alliance Rogue. They've been especially dominant on maps like Flounder, maps with lots of corners and edges, and we'll see whether or not AR is looking to take advantage of that. I think that we are going to take a quick look at the team statistics over the past couple weeks and see how both of these teams have been faring as far as, how they stack up against each other, what they've done so far in the league. So AR certainly cruising their way into the bracket, losing... I can't recall if they lost no games or they lost 1 game getting in through the qualifier, but they've had one hell of a run, Walkie.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it right there. AR completely on a tear. You see the head-to-heads here. AR winning in every single category against Graveyard Shift. Some of them rather close. You see the kills per minute in the qualifiers between the two teams fairly even, but then we see a huge drop off on the side of Graveyard Shift there, going all the way down to 4.6 kills per game. And that was actually the largest drop off between qualifier to leagues for kills per minute. And that really has to do with the fact that last week they did not play with Zeras. We can confirm that Zeras will be playing here tonight. And I think that's exactly what Graveyard Shift needs to control this game and make things go in their favor. They're going to be able to play their game the way they want to.
Well, we're going to see whether or not these teams are going to be able to play up to their full potential. Zera is certainly offering the team a lot of aggressive pressure, which is going to help against Alliance Rogue, but they're going to need to watch their corners and play against a very well-practiced and well-coordinated team in both Alliance Rogue and Graveyard Shift. Let's take a quick look at the map picks and bans. Graveyard Shift has opted to ban Rainmaker. The modes as selected by Alliance Rogue are going to be Tower Control, Clamblitz, and then Splat Zones. So interestingly, CC and CB, same order for the first two sets. The third set will be Splat Zones instead, if necessary. Rainmaker banned this time instead of Splat Zones, but still Splat Zones being kind of pushed all the way to the back shelf and trying to leave that as a last resort if necessary. Do you think that there's a particular reason that they banned Rainmaker, Zach?
You know, I mentioned earlier, it hasn't been that popular in this league, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. It feels very swingy, and it feels like it's one of those modes where even if you get a pretty decent lead into the 30s and 20s, it's something that even in overtime or in the last 15 seconds, the enemy team can come back on pretty convincingly. And we saw some tower control games earlier, the one where they got to 13, I believe that was on Sturgeon Shipyard as well. And even with a last second push into the 30s, it's just not enough. So they're picking modes where it's a little bit more difficult to get those last second pushes all the way to where you need them to get. If you've been behind for the majority of the match, I think these two modes that we're starting with play more so to the consistencies of the stronger team. So that's a bonus for AR. Of course, Splat Zones is something that high-level teams love. They play on constantly, and that's a good fallback point. I think that once again could benefit AR if leaving that for last gives you sort of that rock, almost that pillar to sort of lean back on if you happen to lose. Again, I think the two modes may be more pendulum-esque than Splat Zones can be, even though many zones games devolve at the end into 3 players on each side just madly painting the zone. But love to see it start on tower control. I think it's a very fun map and mode combinations list here. And as we mentioned in our notes with Sturgeon Shipyard last time, very open. If you get backed up to where you're coming out from spawn and they make it to that second checkpoint, you've got tons of room in your own spawn to get specials going, but it is going to be tough to stop a coordinated team from continuing that push.
Certainly. I think that Alliance Rogue seems to value a little bit of that stability, having I'd say, the kind of safety net to fall back on should things go wrong. But, I'd say the fact that they're preparing for the worst kind of gives you the impression that they're expecting quite a lot out of Graveyard Shift. Graveyard Shift going to be stronger than they were last week, and after taking a game off Starburst, I feel like anyone would be a little bit wary of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Graveyard Shift, obviously, you saw in that video that K-Bot was saying they were going toe-to-toe with Starburst for the most part in some of those sets that we saw last week. But I think this is a completely different animal in Alliance Rogue. Yes, Starburst is the best team, but Alliance Rogue plays in a different style to it, especially with Volti in the lineup, and they have to be prepared to consistently stick with their game, and I think they'll be okay going into this one.
It's certainly going to be a difficult match. We'll see whether or not this will be a more of a slugfest or perhaps more of a patient game, which we have not quite. I don't think we've really seen too much from the league, but let's just take one last look at the predictions and get our thoughts from you guys. You both had AR, if I'm not mistaken. How are you still feeling that way? Do you think it's going to be close and go to set 3?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is going to be our first match that goes to a set 3. I think it's going to take everything for each of these teams to get the victory over the other here today. And, you know, like we were saying earlier, what Zach was saying with them banning Rainmaker, I think that was very strong, a good decision for them, because this week in particular, Graveyard Shift has realized that they want to stick to a tried and true comp with Orion sticking on those Tetras and Zera's sticking on the Stamper, and then the other two on that double splash. It's going to give them a lot of burst bombs to follow up on their teammates. And I think they want to just maintain as much as they can going with it. And obviously, if you pick a mode like Rainmaker, that's taken out one of those players to carry out that Rainmaker. You're not able to support each other the way that you would on every other mode.
Yeah, the short version is I do think AR pulls it out. I think Graveyard Shift, though, has sort of the, as you mentioned, Fusion, the patience, the tenacity to hold out and sort of play the long con, which I think, going back to the decision to have Splat Zones be last, I think is super, super interesting. And I think either of the first two modes could go either way. But I think regardless of how those first two go, I don't yet see a world in which AR does not take Splat Zones. And because of that, I think they're going to end up taking the set either 2-0 or 2-1.
Well, we'll see which future ends up coming true. We are going to toss it over to our casters for this next match, Kbot and Magic. They will be showing us a great time and guiding us through this very intense match, which we'll be seeing Alliance Rogue versus Graveyard Shift. Take it away.
To the match of the week for the InkTV Resurgence League in week 2. My name is Kbot. I am joined by Magic. And Magic, this should be a good one. We're hoping for it.
Listen, we could talk about predictions and stuff all day, but nothing is in concrete until the players play it out. So the players are going to duke it out. They're going to give it their ball. They're going to give it their best. And we're going to see what happens, because this might go the distance.
And you want to talk about players duking it out. You talk about two incredibly aggressive, almost injury players, right? In the Obito versus Volti. That's the matchup I'm looking forward to the most here. Obviously, you've got the storylines between Kiver and Obito, but this Volti versus Orion matchup, right? Orion and Volti both have one thing, and that's to run in and try to kill someone. That's their objective. That's their number one priority. To the extent that they are not afraid to give away their lives on some of these QR weapons of the Carbon Roller and the Tetra Dualies. And that'll be something to watch out for here. Of course, Orion died every 24 seconds in last week's matchup versus Starburst. Every 24 seconds, Magic.
That's insanity. When you think about like the time it takes to get back into the map, it's 24 seconds every time you're going down. It's so long. Like, that's so little uptime. But with QR, it makes it worthwhile, which is just an insane concept. And the thing about these players diving in at other players and getting the kills that they want is that they're pretty freaking good at it. So they can do it every single time with relative consistency and be able to create these openings for their players. Another player that I do want to highlight is Gray, who has been absolutely just excreting paint, it seems like.
The number is something like 500. Oh, it's over 500 per minute. Yeah. 500 points of paint per minute. Gray had a game last week over 3,200 on the paint score. By the way, most of my S+ lobbies, my 3 teammates don't total up to that 3,200 number. Gray is doing it single-handedly, let alone needing the entire rest of the team. So it's fun to watch there. And the other thing to watch out for that I think actually might be the most telltale sign of who's going to end up winning this is going to be the cleanup, what I like to call the cleanup players. You've got probably Zeras that'll be coming in on either the Machine or the Wiper, and you've got Scar on the other side playing the Machine for Alliance Rogue. Those are the two players that if they can try to play off of their entries of Volti or Orion and they clean up some of these fights, things will start swaying heavily one direction or the other, especially given a lot of the chip damage things for those weapons at a range between the Wiper and the Machine. And every time the secondary player gets in and gets invested in these games, fights will swing one direction for both of these teams. I mean, they just play incredibly similar play styles in every game that I've seen from them so far. And that's the other reason why this matchup is going to be incredibly exciting, because it's basically the cards are on the table. Who's going to play their play style better tonight?
And the other important thing is that this basically determines who's going to playoffs, right? This is Graveyard Shift needs to win this. They're already 1 loss down, and Alliance Rogue clinches their playoff spot with this win. So not only are they going to be playing at this very similar stake level of intensity, of emotion, they're also playing very similar playstyles. They're also all playing very similar weapons. I can't think of a more even matchup.
Hopefully, it'll go the distance for the first time in the InkTV Resurgence League, but we can only continue hoping. We're still having a little bit of difficulty setting things up, but hopefully we'll get into things in just a little bit here. But let's talk a little bit about the first set we're going to see. It's tower control here, which we actually haven't seen a ton of, I feel like, for either one of these teams in the league so far. Last week, we obviously saw Zones and Clan Blitz come out in the Starburst versus Graveyard Shift set. So we haven't seen them play here. I'm really interested to see if they can start causing chaos and get out ahead of that tower and actually keep the pace with that tower.
We'll have to see, and especially when you're talking about tower control, it's about the staggering of your specials and making sure that you have the momentum to consistently keep things moving, keep that tower moving forward, and ensuring that the space in front of the tower is not in the enemy team's paint. Hopefully, we can see a lot of good special usage. That's really what I want to be focusing on during this set. If not, it's just going to be a bloodbath, and if that's the case, I feel like we're going to see AR take it.
Well, only time will tell, as I believe I'm getting word we're getting into game about right now. Of course, again, a lot of marbles on the line here. The analysts were mentioning it earlier. It's cutthroat here in your 4-team round-robin groups where the top 2 make it to playoffs. Every match counts, and the team that'll walk away with your 3-set victories today might end up being the team that punches their ticket over to playoffs. I realized after I was saying the punch the ticket line that we'd been saying the punch the ticket for the qualifiers line, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for the playoff.
Yeah,
okay, anyway, let's go, folks. Tower Control Sturgeon Shipyard to kick us off.
You know, Marble Run? Do you know what that is? I feel like we're just like dumping all of the marbles into the Marble Run. They're all going to be scattered on the floor. Everything's going to be clashing together. We've got Zera's on the Stamper this time around to pair up with Orion on those Tetra Dualies. And this is going to be Sturgeon Shipyard, which is always favorable for your machines.
And that's the reason why you see Alliance Rogue on the double machine here. Volty not opting for the Carbon Roller this time around, but I still imagine you're going to see very similar playstyles. The other thing, both these teams opting for the double crab, which is not something we're actually used to seeing out of either team. But again, even if you change the weapons in these players' hands, I doubt their playstyle is going to vary that significantly.
No, exactly. Machine is a machine. You can just kind of throw yourself at it, and you cannot do anything to it. It is going to stuff you out. It is going to make sure that your approach options are null and void. And as those eras has a really nice positioning on top of this spinner area, it's not looking good having to dip all the way back, and that's the checkpoint for Alliance Rogue in this first push that they've got going, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down, at least not too much.
The good news here, though, for Graveyard Shift is they were able to clean things up, and now 3-down situation, only 1 person alive, that's Kibber. It'll be the trade that comes through for Zera's here, and now we'll start to see Graveyard Shift pick things up a little more. You already see Obito moving forward. Now as the Crab Tank try to zone away some of the area here. Sweep across the entire map, look for some of these players, but you've got to be careful of who's on your bottom left. Obito will get taken out, but it draws the attention away from this tower where Graveyard Shift has now taken control of the lead. Orion's about to dive in with the Reef Slider. Doesn't quite come up with anything this time around, and it looks like it's getting cleaned up here pretty handily by Alliance Rogue. Zera's dives in, but Volty cleans that one up as well.
I feel like Orion kind of revealed a lot of his cards last week with all those Reef Slider plays, and AR is adapting to it. They've been really just not respecting Orion, but giving him enough space where he's not able to do too much and just kind of crabbing him down whenever he dives forward. Not able to find too much off of this is Alliance Rogue to get back all the way into their court one more time. But overall, I think that I like what I'm seeing. They're just playing disciplined gameplay, you know, giving up checkpoints if they need to make sure that they stop the bleeding quickly.
The question here for Alliance Rogue is, where is your engage? You've got to find a way to get back into the middle of the map. And right now with this composition, you don't have a lot of the consistent killing power they might be expecting, especially when someone like Orion comes barreling forward at you towards the other side of the map. Orion's going to come away with one, and he is going to take her Volti there. Looks like one of the members of Graveyard Shift goes down, and Kibber pops this crab, trying to regain some sliver of the middle of the map back. Scar throwing the Booyah Bomb back into that tower. You start to see Alliance Rogue come through, but Graveyard Shift is saying, hey, come at us here. You might as well. They're comfortable giving away the area around the tower because they know they've got a little bit of a range advantage here. And now Zeres comes up with that one. A beautiful pick with a Spatana Stamper against the crab tank, shutting down this push from Alliance Rogue.
They said, you can take down our crabs, but we can take down yours. That special is flimsy at best, and they are going to be start this steamroll process. You can see Orion's already in position. This is great. They've got good presence in positioning. Can they manage to do it as the Zipcaster goes wild? Zeres, go ahead and show them what it's worth.
Doesn't quite come up with anything there. We're going to be forced to jump away. Obido's diving in. Can't go seem to find anything. Gets double teamed there. And now Gray's there on the crab tank to clean things up. Graveyard Shift will touch the second checkpoint here, but it won't end up getting much more after that. The other thing I'm noticing here, Orion is playing much slower than we're used to seeing out of him. He is not diving in all over the place. And it looks like it's mostly because Graveyard Shift is trying to play more defensively. Again, they know they've got a little bit of room to work with. And now it's a one-for-one trade, though. If Alliance Rogue might be looking to start this snowball. Booyah Bomb goes out. Gray's still in the tower with the crab tank, but that's going to despawn here shortly. Somebody from Graveyard Shift has to find an engagement on the tower, but Zeres finds another one. Burst Bomb, one sword hit. That'll be all it takes. There's just a few ticks of the tower here, and it looks like it's actually going to switch over to Alliance Rogue. 54 seconds remain. Booyah Bomb out. Will they be able to clear past this checkpoint? Looks like Zeres trying to continue with Kiver, but still, no one's watching the tower right now. 2 down. Zeres zips over, and that's past the second checkpoint already. There's still somebody running the tower. Booyah Bomb is out. Where are the tower members here? Finally, it looks like Gray gets taken out, but Scar's here to come in and clean up, working with Volti. Now with the 2v1, Obido's going to find one for the road before going down as well, and Alliance Rogue is looking to set up the lockout here. They're looking for the snowball on tower control Sturgeon, what this map is so well known for, and they've still been able to maintain it here now.
And Volti did such an amazing job of being his annoying self that we've been talking about, trying to pull the aggression, trying to get those picks and shut down areas, and that's what he did. That was so impressive how he could just pull all of that attention away from the tower, which you would think at this point, these players know that they need to focus on as it slides back into mid, and Alliance Rogue takes the first game.
I can't believe that Graveyard Shift wasn't watching the tower as closely, right? Where they didn't have any map control around that tower. Instead, they were trying to go for the individual picks here or there. But at the end of the day, you got to worry about the tower where you're about to lose the lead towards the end of the game, especially on a map like Tower Control Sturgeon Shipyard, right? Which this map is known for being that snowballing monster that your opponents can lock you out of your own court. Yeah, I don't know quite what happened there and what the thought process was, but hey, again, Magic, there's always a reason why we're the ones doing the talking and they're the ones doing the playing.
No, but even here, exactly, like around 1 minute in, you have to start thinking like, okay, we need to start setting up for the defensive hold. And they just weren't. Orion wasn't in the right position, and all of a sudden, there was too much blue paint. There was too much that they had to worry about in one moment, and they just had to give this up. And so I guess what they tried to do afterwards is go for picks, right? And just say, okay, we're just going to try and clean them out and get ourselves a good push going, because that's what we have to do. And they just couldn't. Volti was too strong in that court area. It was such good, clean play from Alliance Rogue.
That's one of the reasons, right, why like a double machine is so impressive here, right? Able to kind of slosh up over some of those ledges that are probably just a little bit too tall for that carbon roller to actually get over. You see a lot of the ability of those machines to have that challenging power onto that high ground. So it will be Alliance Rogue ending up taking that first game. But again, incredibly back and forth here. And with a few more decisions and a little more tidying up towards that objective, this one is going to come down to the wire every single time, Magic, just like we saw in Graveyard's set last week.
Exactly. Graveyard does not give easy games ever. They always have something to say, and I think that's why this is slowly turning into one of my favorite teams to watch because of their aggressive play, because of their scrappy nature, and I hope that they can at least pull something out and make this set go the distance. We're in game 2 on Mako Mart, and Alliance Rogue is just sticking with what works.
Sticking with the double machine. Interesting. I wonder if this is like a tower control adaptation for them. I imagine that's the case, thinking that it's probably not the best to be running that carbon roller on this tower control, but it's the look they're going for here. And hey, to that point, Graveyard Shift is also running the double crab, so you might as well do that too. And I imagine that means that we're going to see things slow down a little bit here, but hang on a second. Zeras might have found an opening, is going to take care of Volty, forces another one to jump back, and now Graveyard Shift is challenging for this first check.
Challenging. It seems like they're doing a pretty good job. We talked about the Zera's follow-up on Orion. This is exactly what we're seeing. The Reef Slider did not go off, but we're seeing Zera's go all the way around and keep things engaged. That's the first checkpoint is broken, and they're pretty close to the second. Finally going to get cleaned up, and Obito is going to stay alive. Best player in the world, by the way. Can't take him down too easily. Can have the crab on the ready, and they can easily turn this into a counter push.
Perhaps so, but we're already seeing Graveyard Shift start to get set up, and you're going to have to watch out for those crabs, one of which just was expired for Graveyard Shift, and now, without Terra having his, forced to back away on his own stack, and the rest of the Graveyard Shift trying to dive in, not quite in synergy. It looks like it's going to be actually a 2-on situation for Alliance Rogue. I didn't actually quite see what caught that there. Alliance Rogue might have just went a little too far forward, a little too quickly, and now they're going to be forced trying to wrestle this tower back from Graveyard Shift. You see very little map control there. Zera's, though, finally going to get taken out here, and it looks like control of this stack is going back over the Alliance Rogue, which will set up the push rather quickly, especially off of that 3 down versus Graveyard.
Can we talk about how good Scar's machine is? I love this machine. Just the way that they can dance around the Tetras, the way that they can use their movement and the in-between timing of shots and to throw people off. It's so good. The Booyah goes down here. Crab is online. That's the lead. This is probably going to be a second checkpoint. Look at where Scar is! And is getting the pincer with Volty from the other side. There's nowhere safe to stand in the base, Kmon.
Crab Tank, though, is out on top of that far left side, forces at least one off of the tower. Gray tries to challenge it. Obito looks like going to get the best of that fight, and it's a 2-down for Alliance Rogue. Graveyard Shift will hold again, and they've got halfway left in this game to try to cook something up and get it rolling here back the other direction. And they're starting to do that, but surprisingly, they're not playing with the same pace we know. Orion tries to go up to the left side, but gets taken down by Volty that time around, and it's a 2-down situation for Graveyard Shift.
They need to find an answer to these machines, and they need to find it fast, or else this is going to end up just like Game 1 as the crab collapses on the 2 frontliners. Ceres is trying to make something happen, but the QR gets to be active one more time. This full roster looks good for Graveyard Shift, but is it good enough? I don't know. There's no consistent picks coming through, Kmon.
Not quite right now, and now it's a deluge of green ink going to the direction of the Graveyard Shift base. Looks like after some of those specials got popped, they're able to take care of it. Now Orion might be coming up with something here. Gets 2. Kibber's forced back on that Crab Tank and has to try to reposition. Zeros is trying to jump up there and try to get something done while Orion goes elsewhere looking for something else. Now Orion drops on top of Kibber, who is forced back off of that stack. But again, it's another 2 down. I didn't see what caught the other player, but it was probably Volty coming up on that far left side flank. Now takes care of Zeras, poking at both Terra and Obito in that Crab Tank, and the push once again falls apart for Graveyard Shift. They don't have the engage potential right now, Magic.
No, it's not over till it's over, though. These players, they're still finding ways to be scrappy and move things forward, at the very least, a little bit at a time. And you see they just keep getting pick after pick after pick, and finally it all coalesces! A wipeout! And Obito is gonna ride this tower. They've got 2 crabs at the ready. This is gonna be a checkpoint.
This is it. Orion's starting to get in position now, but they have to be careful as Scar starts to come over this box. The crab is out, but it gets shoved off of the tower. Orion now rotating back in front of the tower, but that's space you don't want to give away if you're Graveyard Shift right now. Zeres goes down here as well. And Alliance Rogue is starting to get a few specials online. You see a Crab Tank start to come up, and that will be devastating here if used properly. 30 seconds left to go. This is the best Graveyard Shift has looked, but they're forced so far back. It's both Crab Tanks on both sides of the map for Alliance Rogue, shoving Graveyard Shift back and forcing them to go back to the drawing board here with so much blue ink in the area.
How do you pop 2 crabs and not get a kill? That is legitimately just a skill issue, and Graveyard Shift needs to clean this up right now. They are going to start lose this set unless they can get on the tower. I don't know if they can. K-Bot, they're going to try.
They're getting there. Xeris is on top. We're in overtime. Terra now with the Crab Tank already going out, but a lot of the members of Alliance Rogue are in position. There's the Booyah Bomb. GG Bomb on the tower, and Alliance Rogue is going to walk away with a 2-0 in the tower control set.
I mean, that's so tough, right? They had everything going for them on that push. They got the wipeout. That's your green light. That's when you go. That's when you set up. You have to think about exactly what is going to happen in those next few seconds so that you can prepare and make your push happen and make sure that anything that they throw at you is able to at least get countered or pushed away. But those machines they took so much space and they were just standing there.
I don't know quite what the deal is, but it seems like Graveyard Shift isn't quite playing as confidently as we're used to seeing them play. I don't see Orion diving in, going for broke all the time. I don't see Xeris following up on Orion's space that he's able to generate. I don't see some of the other players like Obito even getting more involved with things like the vanilla splatter shot with that Inkzuka. I don't know what happened to this team, but it looks like a completely different identity than what we saw from them last week. And right now, it's not working. They're going to have to take it to the next set. But for a little more in-depth analysis, we're going to send it back on over to the analysts. Fusion, Zach, and Walkie, take us through what we just watched.
Well, that was set 1 of Graveyard Shift versus Alliance Rogue, with Alliance Rogue taking it 2-0, not as convincingly as any of the sets I think we've seen so far in the league. Do you think that Graveyard Shift might have been playing a little bit scared there, Walkie?
Yeah, honestly, Graveyard Shift is at their best when they let Orion and Zera's, dictate the game. We saw a bunch of moments in there where I felt like other players on the side of Graveyard Shift kind of got a little too antsy and maybe panicked and tried to lead forward and create a play that they didn't really need to create, rather than waiting for Orion or Xeris to do something. And that's honestly, to me, why they lost the lead on Sturgeon Shipyard. I think Obito just got a little bit too impatient, and they had plenty of time before they were going to lose that lead. But as I was saying, Obito kind of rushed forward onto the tower and instead ended up dying right away and not allowing the players on the side of Graveyard Shift to move forward before he could make that initial jump. And that's honestly where they kind of lost that game right there, to me, was just the impatience that Obito showed on that Search and Rainmaker game, or tower control.
Yeah, certainly. It felt like there were some opportunities where Graveyard Shift could have just gone all in and taken the pushes towards the very end, taken it all the way. But it felt like they were certainly hesitant. What do you think they could do better going to the second set on Clamblitz, Zach?
Well, I alluded and sort of gave the analogy before we got into set 1 of they're almost handicapping or handcuffing themselves before they get out of the gate. And we really saw that come into effect in set number 1. So really they, I don't want to say it's as simple as unleash the beast, but they have, this entire offensive half of their roster. I think in the previous match, it was the opposite. The offense was there, but the defensive capabilities kept trading back and forth. I think this time you really want to let folks like Xeris and Orion do their thing so that in turn, Obito can be that rock, that player that can be relied on with the shooter class weapons. I believe we saw them on the Vanilla Splash there, where before they'd been on the Splatter Shot or even the 10 attack. We'd love to see some of that come out if they still need some of those capabilities, if they need a little bit more of an offensive edge. And unfortunately, I love the fact that they have their full roster here. They have Xeris back on the Stamper and everything. That's a weapon that they're pretty well known for. But, I mentioned it as well, where on Sturgeon, we saw almost the exact same thing play out from the first match, where we have a score in the teens, and it being a winning score, despite a push by the losing team into the 30s. And so they have to know at this point that those pushes into the 30s during TC are not always going to cut it. And so back to your question of what do they need to do in the next set here, I think it's bringing back those offensive capabilities. And Clamblitz is a great opportunity to do that. You can allocate a more supportive player to to go find the clams and even go as far as to throw them to your players that are further up, that are in a better position to chuck the power clam at the barrier. And so if they're able to do that, I still think there's a chance that they can turn this around, start to get some of that momentum back and come back. But it is going to take a near Herculean effort to stop the tidal wave that is Alliance Rogue right now.
Absolutely. Alliance Rogue certainly looked very strong throughout that game, playing as a unit the entire time. I think that certainly on Clam Blitz, that could play into their advantage. How do you think both teams are going to fare going into Clam Blitz on Museum?
Yeah, I think Clam Blitz in Museum is a interesting one because if we go back to the way that they played during the qualifiers, I think this is a good map for Graveyard Shift. We could expect to see Orion starting a fight early, possibly with Zeros right next to him. And then while they're doing that, doing exactly what Zach was mentioning, allowing those more supportive players to kind of collect those clams, create a lot of turf for themselves in the middle of the map while everyone's distracted on the aggression that Zeros and Orion are going to provide. And I think that if they're able to execute that while, staying alive, collecting the clams, and then getting those 1 or 2 picks to allow them to move onto the plat, this could be a nice opening to this Clam Blitz set for Graveyard Shift. So that's what I'm going to be looking forward to them doing on this next one.
I'm curious to see if we are going to see any team composition shift ups, or we are going to be just seeing a little bit more of rethinking how you play the game. Do you expect to see any changes, Zach, for teams?
I mentioned the big one, and that's Obito on those more offensive shooter weapons, and the Vanilla Splash can certainly provide that. And, during the Mako Mark game, we saw them use both crabs at the same time, basically almost right on top of each other. In fact, the elevation was such that they could have nearly been on top of each other, as one was directly in the middle and one was next to them on top of the boxes, but neither of them were on the tower. This time, we don't have the same objective that's moving at a set pace. As I mentioned before, you can throw clams to whoever's available, lending your offensive players to do better. So for Zeras, could stick on the Stamper. This is, I think, for Museum specifically, a very good Zipcaster map to use and sort of get into the spawn area of the enemy team and do some great work there, keeping them back so that the team members that have clams and go back for clams can continue to keep that barrier open. So that's what I was expect is Obito and Terra, a player that I loved watching in the qualifiers and have barely gotten to talk about today. They are a very flexible player. So, currently we've seen them on the Machine and the Vanilla Splash, but they can play, I believe, Splatlings and more long-range weapons if need be. So if they believe that range is their problem and they need to go outside of something like a Stamper or Sloshing Machine range, Terra, I think, would be the player to accomplish that feat.
Well, I think that with that, we will be tossing it back to the casters for set 2 on Clam Blitz. We'll see who will come out on top, whether or not Graveyard Shift is going to be able to hang in there. Back to you, K-Bot and Magic.
Welcome back, everybody, to the InkTV Resurgence League match of the week. It's Alliance Rogue versus Graveyard Shift, where Graveyard Shift is down 0-1 in sets. And Magic, at this point, Graveyard Shift has to win 4 games coming up here to have a shot at making playoffs. Magic is muted right now and doesn't realize it, so he just went on that beautiful explanation and just didn't bother to unmute his microphone. Welcome back to the cast, Magic. How you doing?
Okay, for everybody in production chat telling me right now not to mute my microphone, if you wanted me to just explode my nose because it's allergy season, if you want me to explode my nose just directly into the cast while you all are having deep analytical discussions, then sure, go ahead. We can just make sure that my mic is never muted again. But instead, I'm going to be courteous to the people that I'm working with, and I'm going to mute my microphone. Thank you very much. Their backs are against the wall.
Oh,
Their
there
backs
it
are
is.
against the wall. And they have to start clawing back like they're a cat that hasn't been fed in 3 weeks.
A zombie cat that has been fed in
Zombie cat.
grave weeks because they're coming from the graveyard. It's Graveyard Shift. Yeah. All right. See, missed opportunity. Magic's not on his A game right now, and that's okay because we're going to be coming back into this one here in just a little bit. And the largest thing that I'm looking for is, can both these teams, but particularly right now, Graveyard Shift, find their identity, right? Where's Orion diving in? Where's Obito and Xerath able to come in off of the cleanup? The other thing that I was really looking forward to was I think Xerath in the qualifiers was playing a lot more Splatana Wiper than Splatana Stamper. And every time I saw Xerath play the Wiper, it seemed like he was just that much more easily able to follow up on what Orion was working with there. So I'm curious to know if we're going to see that Wiper come out at all here. I imagine especially on Clan Blitz might be a little bit more useful than that Stamper on Tower Control. But hey, the players know what they're locking in, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. It's game one of the Tower Control set here, and we'll see what it is. Nope, Sarah's going to end up sticking to the Stamper.
But we do see Volty on that characteristic Carbon, and that is going to be what is ultimately decisive in this game, I feel. Can Graveyard Shift capitalize off of the potentially weak Carbon Roller in theory, or is Volty going to start taking over the game? And I mean, look at the scoreboard so far. This is not looking good for Graveyard Shift.
Oh, hang on a second, though. Graveyard Shift actually was able to punish Alliance Rogue for their over-aggression early, and that's the complete wipeout. Graveyard Shift now is going to have complete control of mid. They're building up their clans and starting to take the opponent's plat, and they're about to have a few crabs at their disposal as well. Terra here with that crab tank, looking to try to fire up to the right side, but actually going to be able to back away here, and there's Volty, baby. You thought this Carbon Roller was weak. Well, Volty is going to tell you a thing or two about that. Now pops the Zuka to get back the other direction and force that 3 down back to the other direction.
Gray's painting up for this crab. This is exactly what you want to see from your support player, right? Giving out those strong specials constantly, while also keeping up the paint to keep things going and keep Volty in there like he's been doing. Here comes the big push, and honestly, this could go the distance.
It's 2 down here. Gray is in fantastic position with that crab tank. It's going to take him down, just stalled for a little while longer, but now it's a 2-down situation for Alliance Rogue. Looks like they're forced to back one away, only getting that down to the 59-point mark. Decent opening push here, starting to get a little bit loose, starting to get a little breathing room, but again, the question here is what will Graveyard Shift have to respond with, and now it's a 3-down situation. Obito versus Gray here in the middle of the map, looks like going to be assisted with that crab tank there, and all of a sudden, Graveyard Shift is starting to look for the position to make another push, but what will they be able to engage with?
This time they're in a much better position though, right? You see Xerath is already up here on this top ground and trying to get Kiver down. They're not able to exactly get all the way around. There are a couple people still just chilling in mid when they need to start fighting, and they just started fighting too late, Kmon. I can't believe that they didn't capitalize off that the way that they needed to, because that was the pristine play.
But the one thing is they don't have very much in the way of hard engagement tools. The only thing they've really got, well, they've got 2 things, I suppose. Xerath when he's in the Zipcaster, and Orion running forward just normally probably with those Tetris. That's about it. They don't have another specials they can pop to really force themselves in and force the issue. Aside from this Reef Slider coming in here, going to buy a little bit of space for Graveyard Shift. Now you see the front 2 for Graveyard Shift continue to move forward. How much space will they be able to continue to buy? Looks like quite a bit with the 2-down situation for Alliance Rogue. The lead's going to go back to Graveyard Shift, and now Obito in position with that crab tank, looking to force these members back. Orion sharply looking for another target. Found Kiver up there on the top side, but it's not going to be able to take him out this time around, and it looks like finally it's going to start collapsing here in the favor of Alliance Rogue as they're going to push back in. But you have to be careful because you never know when Orion's going to pop out. Gets another one there, and it looks like Graveyard Shift might stick around and maintain control of the flat, building up another power clam, doing the exact same thing that Starburst did to them on this map last week.
It's so crazy. Xerath finally came alive, baiting out players so that he could one-pop them with a couple nice vertical and horizontal flicks, and just moving around exactly how a Stamper needs to position and play if they want to make the most of their toolkit. And it finally looks like Xerath has got the answer down and is able to take advantage of AR and their potentially over-aggressive positioning. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they can keep them down long enough, because AR is always ready to fight back.
Always ready to fight back, and there it is indeed. The wipeout comes through, picking off 2 members and then looking for the second 2. Alliance Rogue now has control of the graveyard shift flat area. Booyah Bomb goes out, buying even more space, especially for Bolty, who comes forward to throw in a power clam. We're starting to get pretty close here. Alliance Rogue might be able to swing this back the other direction, especially if they're not careful with the amount of paint that's here. But the one power clam that's there is in the crab tank. Gray isn't able to come forward and throw that football in, and so Alliance Rogue is going to be forced to regroup here with 40 seconds left to go.
Is Graveyard Shift gonna steal one underneath the noses of AR? It looks like they're trying, but Volti decides to swat down the fly that is Orion, and the clam goes in. That was unbelievably close how it could have gone the other way, but Graveyard Shift was not prepared.
And now it's another 2 down for Graveyard Shift. They're going to have to scramble to get any ounce of mid control back in order to try to push in, because right now, Alliance Rogue is flirting some of the crab tanks. Gray's in crab tank right now, but Scar's coming up on the right side, finds Orion already, and Orion will have to jump back in from spawn to try to get something. The 20-second overtime timer starts now. It's 2 down situation for Alliance Rogue. There's now Zipcat's going to pop that almost immediately. What will he be able to find with this one? Sees Gray on the backside, looking to try to find this one, is not able to fully come away with it quickly or cleanly, but it's a 2 down now for Alliance Rogue. The Reef Slider goes in, but where's the power play? It gets cleaned up already. There's the wipeout, but they've got to find it to throw it in. They will be able to do that there. The clams are coming into the basket, and that will be the game for Graveyard Shift, finally taking a game here.
And this is what Graveyard Shift needs to do. They need to start making plays. You saw Zeraz go absolutely wild with that Zipcaster in the last second and knew exactly how to roll the dice in his favor. That was quite possibly the best way to utilize that Zipcaster. Don't go towards the basket. You don't need to get all these crazy ideas in place. You just need to start causing problems and allowing your team to play off of you. That was so clean, and I need to see more of that in the future. Yeah, you can see this replay here.
And how do you force people to play off of you? You set up a crossfire. By that Zipcaster going to the back lines, now Gray is stuck in the middle trying to fight 3 people that are all completely surrounding him. There's no escape there. You can't pick one target to shoot at and just solve all of your problems, because you've got 3 individual targets that you're going to have to worry about. Those are the kinds of plays that we need to continue seeing. And those also, I will say, are the kinds of plays that are going to be easier to perform on splat zones when we get there in the next set. When Orion is able to get behind folks, or when Zeras is able to get behind folks, when they're trying to engage and trying to take control of that splat zone, the 3rd set here is, and the reason why Alliance Rogue put off that 3rd set to the end is because they don't want to meet Graveyard Shift on zones. So if this one ends up going the distance here by Graveyard Shift taking another game in this clam set, things could be looking to their favor, but again, they've got another game to win here on clams. We have to see them maintain this level of consistency. We have to see that happen, because otherwise, we've seen time and time again, Alliance Rogue continue to make the right objective plays towards the end of the game to secure themselves the victories. And we'll have to see if they're able to do that in the next 2 games here to walk away with this set.
Graveyard Shift does so much better with a more wide open map, and I mean in terms of objective play, right? Clamblets and zones have so much more to do with how you position in a wider arrangement, and because of that excuse me, they can use their better engaging weapons to their fullest potential, right? Whereas machines kind of have to stick towards one spot and can't move as quickly, but they can really hold down those areas, and that's why tower control was so good for that double machine comp, and why Volti was probably a little bit shaky coming off of the machine trying to play around this really wide open map with the carbon. It just wasn't going to work out in the end. However, it's going to be very interesting to see if they adjust to Clamblets. I think this is Graveyard Shift's mode.
We'll see. Of course, we will see. They just need one more game to take this set and force us back to that set 3 on splat zones. But again, they can't get too far ahead of themselves, right? Have to focus now on this next set. And maybe there's a universe where Alliance Rogue goes back to playing that double machine composition, and then maybe you've got more problems. It's hard to tell for sure, right? And of course, Volty was still coming up with value in that last game, so it's not like, there's much of a difference there. But it could be a thorn in the side, right? A little bit of extra range, forcing members back, and a matchup that's not quite as good for that Splatoon Stammer. So we'll see here. Of course, now heading over the Inkblot Art Academy for this second game. Volty sticks to that tried and true carbon roller here. And it looks like almost identical compositions coming out, but now Gray is over to that Neo Splash and Matic, opting for perhaps that more supportive playstyle.
And you can see actually on the minimap, I don't know if you saw, Gray is using sub power-up with these suction bombs to put out longer range pressure. And I think that's actually really important, is so that they can control more areas of the map. But I also think that it doesn't really matter at all if you just get run over and steamrolled by Obito, who's going crazy and already crabbing on the plat of Alliance Rogue. And K-Bot, this is looking really good.
The pacing was so fast there for Graveyard Shift. Already on within the first 20 seconds of the game, you've got a crab tank on your own plat that you've got to deal with. And it bought so much space for Graveyard Shift, but now they've got to find a way to form a power clamp here, and they've given up some of that space onto the plat, and they've got to be careful. Orion, you can't go against that versus Volty on the carbon roller. Doesn't have the opportunity to find an opening now, and it looks like Alliance Rogue is going to try to come on back into mid. Hang on, though. Sarah's in the Zipcast might be looking for something cheeky here, especially now as Alliance Rogue is starting to run forward. Looks like they were able to escape Sarah's at least temporarily, but now he comes up from the back sides. It's a double team there, but Volty is able to clean things up on that far left area, and now things are going to neutralize and stall out for a moment. For the Puyo Bomb comes in, Alliance Rogue still looking to make a push.
I think that's the main difference between these two compositions, is that one is focused around displacement, has the Zuka, has the Crab, has the missiles, has the Trip Strikes and the Booyah, so they can very easily start snowballing and displacing the members of Graveyard Shift, whereas the other one's focused on hard engage and hard pick power. It's not looking like it's going to be in the favor of Graveyard Shift in the long run if they aren't able to consistently keep themselves alive and keep the other members of Alliance Rogue down. And this is looking like it's going to be not the play for Alliance Rogue.
The fight in front of the basket ends up going to the favor of Graveyard Shift there to shut that push down from Alliance Rogue just when they need it most. We are still scoreless, and we are 2 minutes into this game. Neither team fully able to find something, but now it's a 2-down situation for Alliance Rogue. Now making it a 3-down situation. Giver tries to go in here, but now the power claims are going to start to come in. Obito's able to find one, now down to the 45-point mark, going back to mid for a few claims here, and as the crab tank gets ready to continue to keep up the pressure, you see Zera's going in on the Zipcast, trying to distract a few members. Volty trying to dive in, but is going to get taken down in the process. And now Obito backing up for the crab tank, allowing for some of these other members to come on in here. But it looks like we were able to see a drop come through for Kibber. Zera's is able to clean up, though, and actually a few more claims were able to get in, extending this push even temporarily. Obito might try to go for this again. Got to be careful with the crab tank, dipping and dodging around the bullets. Your crab tank is so slow, it means nothing here. 9 points left to go here. 3 more clams for Graveyard Shift as Obito comes up with 2. Orion's able to follow up here and is able to find yet another one. There's the extra few clams, and there's the knockout. Graveyard Shift is going to take the second set in this match, and for the first time in the Resurgence League, we're heading to a decisive third set.
I'm shocked. I'm not shocked because I didn't think Graveyard would win. I'm shocked at the efficiency and the presence that Graveyard Shift displayed in this set. They looked so much more confident and adjusted and ready to play around what AR was going to throw at them. The confidence was so much more there, and I think it's because they finally felt that pressure and they sort of limit tested them in TC and decided, no, we can do this.
They can almost certainly do this here. Again, all it takes is a few members getting forward and then able to work off of one another. That's exactly the point here, as Orion was able to sustain what was going on after you saw Obito continue to keep the push alive. How many times, by the way, did that timer almost expire? But someone from Graveyard Shift was always around to find a clam in the basket. And now, folks, like I said, for the first time in the Resurgence League, we'll be heading to a third set. But before we get there, we're going to send it back on over to the analyst desk for their thoughts leading into this zones set.
Talk about a change of pace. That was unexpected and a great show from Graveyard Shift. They bounced back from that difficult first set and really showed us how quickly they can play. After they kind of gained their composure in that first game, it was really all Graveyard Shift. I'm excited to hear what you guys think about that. What did they change that made it go so well for them?
We saw a much more coordinated Graveyard Shift, like K-Bot was alluding to. We saw players feeding off of each other throughout the entire game, leading the way with Orion and Xera's like we talked about. And then from there, it was Obi and Terra who always were there to follow up anything. We saw Terra's Crab Tank helping to keep Orion alive at some points. Then the next second, it was helping to finish off somebody that Zeros was fighting. So it was great coordination throughout for them, and they really played to their game in this one. And you gotta like the change of pace that we saw from Graveyard Shift.
Yeah, they completed the equation in a sense. You know, we really wanted to see them become the team that we know they can be and become as well-rounded as they are. They really lived up to that. I think their fight selection was great. They didn't take as many odd man opportunities. I don't think they got picked off as much late, despite one or two times on that Clam Blitz game. And you could just see in that what ended up being the only real push of the game that secured their set win there on Inkblot Art Academy. Them do a fantastic job of maintaining the pressure. Orion being allowed to do what they are best at with those Tetras, being able to juke and dodge around and get those splats that they need for Obito to come back in later and substantiate the claims. And even vice versa, you know, Obito holding it down at the base of the barricade, getting those initial splats, and then Orion coming in and acting as the distraction so that the rest of their team could go around, pick up those remaining clams. And as K-Bot mentioned, you know, that timer got so close multiple times to ticking down and the barricade resetting, that barrier coming back up, but they had just enough, and they were given that time by their skirmisher and their slayer players to really get the remaining clams that they needed, finish it off. And now as a result of that, as we sort of thought based on how momentum-esque and pendulum-esque these first two modes can be, each team takes one of them, and we're going to set number 3 for Splat Zones as a result.
Yeah, I think the change of pace kind of caught Alliance Rogue off guard. They seemed to be a little bit flustered going into the second game in that set. After that, after that first game 1 loss in overtime, it felt like they were just playing very hesitant. As soon as Graveyard Shift got onto their plat, it was lights out for them. And we are, in fact, going to make it to a set 3. We're going to be seeing old, reliable Splat Zones. How does this fare for them? Does it bode well for Alliance Rogue, or is Graveyard Shift going to pull through and take home a reverse sweep? Walkie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to something that the casters were alluding to on Splat Zones in particular. Can you get Orion and Xera's kind of behind the enemy on Splat Zones? And honestly, it's an easier said. It's something that's easier said than done. Alliance Rogue knows that's exactly what Orion's game plan is going to be, so they're going to try to shut that down quickly by, you know, keeping up those players alive, like Gray, who's always in that backline ready to make sure that nobody can slip through. So now it's kind of that back and forth. Both teams kind of know each other's game plan. It's really going to come down to execution on these two ones. But something I do want to point out about Alliance Rogue in general is Alliance Rogue has lost more games here today than they have in the entire qualifier and week 1 combined. So Graveyard Shift is really pushing them to their limits. And if there's any team that can beat them, it's definitely Graveyard Shift here.
Yeah, Graveyard Shift's back is a bit against the wall. Again, just to remind you guys of the stakes, if Alliance Rogue takes home a win, they will be making playoffs. If Graveyard Shift loses this, they will not be making playoffs. If they win, they have to fight it out in week 3 to determine whether or not they will make it. And I'm curious to see if they're going to just stand under the pressure or they're going to crack again. If you know, if they're going to be 6 feet under at the end of today. How do you think Splat Zones is going to change this equation, Zach?
Well, I'm kind of conflicted because every fiber of my being is like, don't let this one get to game 3 in this Splat Zone set because it's Flounder Heights, Alliance Rogue has Volti. If they go Carbon, it's going to be very difficult to combat because they have so many walls and areas to play off of. But I also know, based on how Graveyard Shift qualified into the league, that with that last game of a set pressure on them, they were facing a reverse sweep against Nightmare, and they were able to overcome in that scenario. So Graveyard Shift, I think, despite having the best chance if they're able to take this one in 2, has certainly proven that they can come back in the face of adversity in a final game scenario. So for the mode specifically, you know, I think they sort of split their team the way that they have been, with Orion and Xerath sort of maining the, you know, get into the front lines quickly, make sure that you can distract and take their focus away from the objective, let Terra and Obito focus on the zone, and then allow Obito especially to come forward and assist in either skirmishing or getting those final picks that either Orion or Xerath is not able to clean up. I think Terra, as I've mentioned, Terra is a very flexible player. Very interested to see if they maintain the vanilla splash. You know, based on what we've seen, I'm thinking they will. However, lots of opportunity for zones, especially since we're going to see Hagglefish to come in with some sort of splat lane like a heavy and use that wave breaker to their advantage. So very interested, specifically from a compositional standpoint, how they start this set and obviously how they finish.
Well, we're going to have Magic and K-Bot take us to the finish line, the last set of the evening. Will Alliance Rogue come out on top, or will Graveyard Shift bring it back? Take us away, guys.
The stakes could not be much higher here. It's only one more best of 3 set on Splat Zones to potentially determine which of these 2 teams is going to make it to playoffs and which of these 2 teams is going to have to sit out on that fateful day in May. And Magic, like the analysts were talking about, Graveyard Shift is starting to push Alliance Rogue to their limit. We'll see if Alliance Rogue can refine their identity here and come back.
Well, Alliance Rogue never really stuck to one identity in the entire run that they've had. You know, they've always been very flexible. They can adapt to a lot of situations. They're not consistently a team that's going to knock you out in one go. They're going to make sure that they adapt to what you do. If Graveyard Shift is going to get stagnant, if they're not going to be able to clean themselves up like they did in that Clan Blitz set, we're going to see a lot of what we saw in the Tower Control set, where it's back and forth, where there's a lot of fighting, where all of a sudden these plays are being made by AR that really shifts the match into their favor. They need to bring that back.
And the interesting point here that I want to point out is the order in which these maps are going to be played. We're starting on Mako Mart, then Haggle in game 2, and if necessary, we go over to Flounder Heights. Flounder Heights was the game that Graveyard Shift won versus Starburst against last week. So you got to imagine that they're feeling pretty confident heading into this one. But as we start, Mako Mart is one hell of a carbon roller map. And you've got to imagine Volti is licking his chops right now, looking to try to take this to Graveyard Shift.
Graveyard Shift really wants to play zones. I've seen some of their tweets. They really feel confident that if they are not banned down on zones, that they can easily take it no matter who they're playing. It is their comfort zone. So they should be able to adapt. Even if you throw something like a carbon at them, it really didn't bring too much effectiveness in the last set. I think that Graveyard Shift is ready and willing to fight against this carbon roller and not worried at all, which is surprising considering it's Volti.
And like we were talking about earlier, to that end, if Graveyard Shift can get behind the zone and cause problems for Alliance Rogue, preventing setups from potentially happening, it could spell disaster. But here we go, folks. It's 3 games now between these two to decide who is going to come out on top. Xerath sticking with that Stamper, and the double crab composition comes out very similar across the board here.
Oh, very similar. Nothing unexpected. These players know exactly how they're going to want to be playing. They found their comfort for the set. We're not going to be seeing much change unless they really think it can throw off their enemy, or it can really help their game plan and game style. Alliance Rogue, though, comes up with the first cap. Nothing too crazy, just a couple of picks, a couple of overextensions, and it's looking pretty back and forth. Nobody's really given up mid yet.
We say that. Now it's a 2-down situation for Graveyard Shift. Terra's going to be able to get one for the road here. But one thing I'm going to look for on Alliance Rogue's engagements is Volti working within those Ink Strikes and that Booyah Bomb. If you can try to displace your enemy teams with what's going on there with those specials and then set up Volti in positions like this, where he's now sharking forward to be able to get right on up close to that ledge, things could be problematic, especially when you don't quite know where they're coming from. But now, Graveyard Shift has got to find an engagement onto the zone here soon. They pop both of the crabs, trying to force these members back, being afraid of what's going on underneath them. And Alliance Rogue might be 100-0ing this one as well. No, actually, the cap comes through. Caster's Curse almost instantly there. And now Orion's behind them again, looking to try to cause some trouble. Going to walk away with one, and it'll be a 2-down situation for Graveyard Shift. Even still, Alliance Rogue maintains this.
I love how Graveyard Shift did that retake. They made sure that Volti was clear out because he could just kind of dunk on those crabs and there's not a whole lot that they can do. So they cleared him out, pushed him back, and Azera's went around this far left side and all of a sudden a wipeout for Graveyard Shift? What? It came up. What happened?
Looks like they were able to once again sweep across the entire map, and if you can pick off one member at a time, that'll be exactly what this team wants to do. And now look at their positioning already. Both these members of Xera's and Orion are so far forward into the enemy base, but it looks like Orion's going to get taken down in the process, and Xera's might be forced to jump back away. Terra gets trip striked outside of the enemy stack now. It is going to be collapsed on by Volti. There it is. The flank angle comes through, opening the window of opportunity for Alliance Rogue to take back the zone.
And though Graveyard Shift feels confident they can't get sloppy, with Volti going to be sharking under every single ledge, using all of their Zuka shots to make sure they can't sit comfortably. This is exactly what Volti needed in the last two games that we saw, and it's finally happening. He's found his rhythm.
Now, though, Graveyard Shift has to find a way to engage here. One down situation. Zera's looking for an angle. Obito in the crab tank again, trying to push some of those members, particularly Volti, back. But again, look at the green ink there. You have to imagine that's the work of Gray, able to do so much for Alliance Rogue here. And now there's no one left to focus the zone as Volti was able to dive forward for Alliance Rogue. They go up 1-0 in this set, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off.
That was convincing. The way that they held those zones, those stack areas, it seemed like Graveyard Shift could never even get close unless they had some kind of crazy flank from Xera, some kind of pick and reef slider from Orion. And because of that, they were never able to position in the aggressive ways that they wanted because of how stifling that map can be. And really, it makes sense considering what weapons they were playing. Hopefully they can bounce back because I want to see this set go all the way to Flounder.
We'll see if it does, but remember that the longer this set goes on, I imagine the closer and closer we'll see Graveyard Shift get. This map heavily favored for Alliance Rogue. The Carbon Roller, again, has a feast here with all the sorts of different ledges and the smaller little angles even that you're able to find with that weapon. But now we're going back to Hagglefish. Magic, as you mentioned in the Clam set, it's a more wide open map. We get to see a little more breathing room. Maybe we're going to see Graveyard Shift being able to generate a little bit more space in terms of being able to open things up a little more, get a little more breathing room, have angles for Orion to dive in there. But of course, you have to imagine this one's going to be close. And again, I mean, either team can lock out on Flounder Heights, but I have to imagine that one might be close to Graveyard Shift favored as well if they can make it that far. But Graveyard Shift has got to win the next two.
They need to hold their nerves as well. They understand that they have to win this. They have to win out now if they want to make it to playoffs. But so does Alliance Rogue. Both of these teams are fighting with their last breath and pulling out all of the stops. Is that a heavy splatling I see from Scar of all players?
That is a heavy splatling from Scar, Magic. Volti over to the sloshing machine. Must not like the Carbon Roller on this more wide open map. But already, it's a 2-down situation. Graveyard Shift has control of the zone, and they're going to start flying forward.
It's so passive. Scar was all the way back there while all the rest of his team went down, and now Graveyard Shift is in their base. This is exactly what they need. Is Zera's zipcasting, is Orion running forward. It doesn't matter if they go down, they've got QR. Terra's and Obito have the crabs at the ready probably, at least very soon. Even if the cap goes back, I'm not confident Alliance Rogue can hold this.
Booyah Bomb goes out, and Alliance Rogue, to your point, has utilized all of the resources they have at their disposal, and now we'll see the counter come in from Graveyard Shift. You see Zera start to move forward, the Crab Tank comes through as well, and now a Crab Tank in response out of Gray. It gets Zera's, it gets Obito there as well. A beautiful double out of the Crab Tank from Gray. It's a 3-down situation for Graveyard Shift, and Alliance Rogue has been able to cap right back.
That's a crab dip if I ever saw one. I mean, really, the way that Gray was able to capitalize there, insane. Like, it must have been super precise shots, and they're going to be sending it over again. Kibber just knows exactly where to stand, exactly where to position, exactly where to fire shots, and even if Obito pops this, he can move right on in because of all the paint and all the ground that they gave up. The Wavebreaker goes down, and K-Bot, that's the lead for Alliance Rogue.
Here's the other thing about the Wavebreaker, it prevents Orion from getting in. Now has to reach slide through the Booyah Bomb, but is able to come up with one. Still need to cap the zone, though. It's 2 down for Alliance Rogue. Orion's trying to fight for that right side. Scar now on this heavy, trying to play more back, trying to bait Graveyard Shift into coming in, but now walks forward to barely find one onto Terra. Gets traded in the process, and the zone's going to go back to Graveyard Shift. But again, how stable will this actually be? Now Zera's goes down, the Crab Tank gets challenged, Obito forced to back away, and there's someone on the far left side that they have to deal with. It looks like it's going to go straight back to Alliance Rogue, and they're going to continue to hold.
Going to continue hold for now, but that was a little bit risky, like you said, on the far left flank, and now instead, it's Graveyard Shift who's able to utilize it as Orion is dancing, dipping, diving with the Tetras, maybe being able to find a pick or two, and it does! That's Bolty going down on the machine, and it doesn't matter that it gets traded out, because Zeras is all the way over here! Finally, Alliance Rogue has them on the back foot, and the Wavebreaker goes down so Orion can't dive forward. Like you said, a perfect counter for the Tetras, and that must have been their thinking.
Must have been the case here, but again, Graveyard Shift slowly starting to inch back, and folks, we've still got another 2 minutes of this one if it doesn't knock out sooner. Graveyard Shift takes back control of the zone. Here comes Orion diving in, almost finds one on the Scar, but there's the Crab Tank that comes out. Kibber can't quite seem to clean up on to Orion, and now there's control of the courtyard that goes back to Graveyard Shift. Gray forced back. You're noticing very little specials out of Alliance Rogue, and the lead's going to go over to Graveyard Shift. Alliance Rogue has to find an engagement within the next few if they want to be able to close this one out here, or otherwise Graveyard Shift is going to send us back to Flounder Heights. 13 ticks of the timer left to go. The lob shot, Booyah Bomb, the Hail Mary tries to come in. Reef Slider coming in to try to lock down the zone. The Wavebreaker goes out trying to lock Orion down, but it's not enough. Graveyard Shift holds on, and we're sending us to one final game.
Orion was the hero that Graveyard Shift desperately needed in that match. They couldn't shut him down, even with the heavy splatling, even with all of those wave breakers, had so much room and opportunity to move. But then on top of that, the pristine target selection that we saw in that last clip where he was dipping and dancing around, instantly snapping to the player that he needed to shoot at every single time. And that is the difference between a bad Tetris and a good one, and a great one, is the fact that you can instantly switch as you need to.
And I imagine we're probably going to see the end of the game right here. You see it start to get set up with a lot of these burst bombs, you know, starting to get a little bit of that chip damage, forcing some of these members back. I called it the Hail Mary Booyah Bomb. Just try to get something on the zone, try to neutralize it, try to enable this ability to find a way in. But the second these crab tanks come out, they keep the members of Alliance Rogue at bay. And that is exactly the name of the game. And I imagine, Magic, that's exactly the game plan as we head back to Flounder Heights. Remember, it was Graveyard Shift that won this game versus Starburst last week, and Starburst then took the rest of the games in the series. So here, if Graveyard Shift has a best chance of winning a zones map, it might be this one, and they might be able to defy the odds once more.
If they do it, then not only is everybody's fantasy bracket going to be broken, not only
Except
is
mine.
Alliance, except yours,
Except mine.
Sure, the guy saw it coming from a mile away. Nerdy K-Bot all of a sudden becoming a fortune teller. If they do this, they send Alliance Rogue basically packing, because this is the fight for second. This is for
Alliance,
playoffs.
well, I mean, so the real chaotic thing happens if Alliance Rogue's able to beat Starburst, and something through the grapevine tells me that that set might be close as well, and we'll have to watch out for that one next week. But once again, we've got one final game of this set. You can't be thinking about what's coming next. You've got to get your brain focused on the match that's about to happen. Load up those espresso machines one more time, because we've got one more map. Splat Zones, Flounder Heights. Who's going to be able to lock out their opponent?
Who's going to be able to lock out their opponent as we finally see Xera's switch to the machine for Flounder Heights, which is an important adaptation. The swords do not work very well here. The machines are what is important, but Volty also switches back to the carbon.
Look at Orion, though, already diving on top of Star on the back sides, but it looks like it's Alliance Rogue that was able to capitalize off of Graveyard Shift going in a little bit too far, too fast. Volty's back on this carbon now, and he's probably going to have to try to play a little bit tricky. You see him thinking about sneaking up that wall. Decides not right now. Might try to use that play a little bit later, and now jumps out. Isn't going to be able to find that one out. Orion, who's able to dodge away almost instantly, but the trip strikes come out here on top of the other zone. Terra's is still back there painting this one, and we are still neutral here. Finally, maybe some picks come through, but no. Volty's able to trade that one back onto Orion, and we're still seeing these trades back and forth. Looks like finally maybe Graveyard Shift is able to start setting things up, and with Volty going down in the Inkzuka, Alliance Rogue's not going to have very many specials to get back in here.
You know what was really a deciding factor on that? Is Volty missing that flick, because then Orion and Xera's just went up the left side and were able to capitalize and make that play happen. I can't believe that Orion got out of that flick. That was disgusting movement from Orion. But now we see disgusting crab usage from the Alliance Rogue as they send all of their specials flying down onto the enemy zone, and to go down, Orion no longer can make any plays as he is out of the QR.
And that's the other thing here. Graveyard Shift actually didn't get very many points on the board. Neither team fully getting there now, and it looks like Graveyard Shift might be looking to try to do that beautiful pick from Xera's, using the arc of that machine to get that one over to Scar, and now starting to charge forward with the rest of Graveyard Shift, trying to apply some of these penalty points. Imagine seeing this Booyah Bomb go right down on top of the zone, and there it is for the cap. Volty gets cleaned up, trying to cause a little bit of chaos over top of that bridge, and once again, Graveyard Shift has control.
Also, for anyone who says that Flounder Heights is, a bad map because you can't retake on it, I wanted them to watch this game and see just how many lead changes that we're going to be seeing. Because holy cow, it's been 3 minutes in, and the lead has changed at least 4 times. So, I don't know! I think it's fine! I think Flounder is fine, everybody! They already are trying to get themselves back into this map, and Alliance Rogue is doing so successfully.
Here comes that Inkzuka, looking the long ways across the map, across the bridge. Now the counter, tripling strikes come out here as Orion starts digging down the enemy side of the map, looking to try to get around back behind them. And again, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. If Orion finds a way to get behind Alliance Rogue, he's going to continue to cause problems as long as he can get there fast enough. The trip strikes go out on top of the zone as Alliance Rogue is looking to charge back to the other side of the map, but they still know Orion is behind them. They still know they can't focus on any one thing completely, because they're about to get collapsed on at any moment. 2 minutes left to go. Graveyard Shift still in control of both of these zones, and finally Orion gets taken down as he gets onto the Reef Slider. It looks like Alliance Rogue is going to be able to find the cap to try to keep this game even.
And that was such good play from Alliance Rogue. If you're getting pincered, you need to move your unit forward, and they did so perfectly, and not stepping too far, but stepping enough that Orion could not push them together, right? Alliance Rogue finally in control. Nice Zuka from Volty is able to find one, and Orion is trying to desperately get back up onto this ramp using those crazy wall spots, and is able to maybe poke out Critter. I don't think so. They really need their specials.
This is exactly the play you want to see from Alliance Rogue. This is the setup, forcing those enemies on that elbow away from the zone. Here comes the triple link strike, trying to find something, but the Booyah Bomb, the counter things here. Graveyard Shift into reposition and can't quite capitalize on the space that they were able to generate off those trip strikes. Now they take back control of their own zone, but will they be able to continue extending this? Xera's up on the Booyah Bomb, gets downed by the crab, when with 60 seconds left to go, Alliance Rogue still looks like they're holding on strong. The triple link strikes come out here, and Volty's in position over there trying to dislodge some of these members, but once again, Alliance Rogue Rogue continues to build up the area around. You see Scar sharking there from the triple ink strikes come out, but there's no one able to follow up on that. You see Scar continuing on down on that bottom right side. Here comes Orion though, Reef sliding over the top of the map. It's gonna get taken down in the process, and it's another 2-down situation for Graveyard Shift. This is the consistency of Alliance Rogue. This is how they win games. Will Graveyard Shift be able to find the engagement though? That's the main question with 30 to go.
And they really haven't found a good answer to Volti on this map. Every time it seems like they have a good opportunity, either Azuka comes out or the members of Alliance Rogue swarm, but this time it's Graveyard swarming! Can you believe it, K-Bot?
Obito able to come up with one on a Scar, and the rest of the teammates able to clean things up. Now 3 down for Alliance Rogue. They're back to spawn, and Graveyard has one final opportunity to hold, but Obito gets taken down by Volti. They're not going to have access to those triple link strikes for a little while, and now they don't have control of the zones. It's 2 down for Graveyard Shift, and as the whistle blows, they might not have the ability to capture control of the zones. They do for a brief moment, getting that back, but Volti shreds the Booyah Bomb with the Inkzuka. I have never seen that interaction before, but it's Alliance Rogue that's going to be able to maintain their slot here and move on to playoffs.
Consistency. Like you said, every single time they got pushed back, they found a way to get back. They found a way to climb up, to get Volti into those right spots, to make sure that they had their specials used exactly how they needed them to get back to those zones and keep Graveyard Shift from getting too snowbally. And that was exactly what they needed. They needed to stop everything in their tracks. They needed to heat up so much that there was no snow left on the ground, and Graveyard Shift just melted away.
And look, say what you want about Graveyard Shift going 0-2 and now being out of playoffs contention for this league, but they are putting up one hell of a fight against some of the best teams in the English-speaking Splatoon community. This is it. It's Alliance Rogue versus Starburst, right? You can't get much better than these two opponents. And just how much did Graveyard Shift on every single moment make them squirm? They were so close to doing it this time, but it was not today. This cheesy little Zuka to shred the Booyah Bomb there at the end. Oh my goodness, Magic. I mean, this one had a little bit of everything.
It really did. This was one of the... I'm so glad that InkTV is putting on every single set that they can and not skimping out, because if we hadn't been able to see this set, it would have been a shame, right? Like, imagine if this set just went unnoticed. Imagine if all of the chaos didn't get recorded and documented. I am honored to be a part of this entire movement.
The match of the week lived up to expectations, but before we close out of the night, we're going to send it over to our analysts to break down what we saw and maybe do a little bit of a preview to what we'll see again tomorrow night. Thank you all so much for having us, but stick around. The analyst desk is going to break things down.
Thank you so much, Magic and K-Bot. That was quite the game and quite the finish, the explosive finish nonetheless. The near comeback. Inkzuka on that Booyah Bomb. What a crazy game. It felt like Graveyard Shift could have had it at any moment, but Alliance Rogue just managed to stay strong until the very end, and they managed to pull through and get that victory, secure themselves a trip to the playoffs. How are you feeling about that game, Walkie? What did you notice that went right for both teams?
I mean, both teams played their heart out. Let's get that out of the way right off the bat. I mean, both of these teams really showed exactly how strong they were going into this set, and you know, their prospects for the future as well. But just going into what we saw in that last one, there was AR. They were able to get the wipe. They were able to get the Flounder Heights knockout for, you know, not as long as they would have liked, but as long as they needed to win that game. And on the other side, Graveyard Shift was never able to secure that final wipe that got them, you know, the points that they needed. We saw at the end with about 20 seconds or so left, it was possible that they were going to do it. They had 3 down, but the one that they didn't take down was Volti, and Volti was in position to take out everybody there, Zach.
Yeah, that was absolutely unbelievable. As K-Bot said, that certainly lived up to our match of the week expectations. If anything, that almost makes me look forward even more than Starburst versus AR to Graveyard Shift versus Penguin, because I think Graveyard Shift really proving that they are a team that can battle until the very end. They do such a fantastic job of managing their specials in that regard, and they also are able to change their composition and also deal with the changes that came up to face them. You know, they had to go up against Volti's Carbon Deco, which was arguably one of the toughest things that they had to contend with and wasn't always a factor in all of these matches. You can see here Obito, of course, helping to maintain some of the map control that was really important in giving them the advantage back against AR. Allowed them, since they were using that double V splash composition, to farm up their crab. That was a moment at the end of that last game that could have been a turning point. Was, I think it was Obito who just got a crab ready before getting taken down up on one of the zones by Volti, effectively ending what could have been a huge asset had they been able to hold on longer in that overtime section. So really, really close. It came down to just a couple of plays and mistakes from both teams that led to the result that we had here. But this is exactly what we wanted from the league. We wanted that set 3, game 3 action, and I only hope it continues from here.
Yeah, you guys called it, and Volti delivered. Volti proving his worth on that carbon roller on that last game, sneaking in, taking out several specials that could have saved the game for Graveyard Shift. If you had to, I apologize for saying all that and then immediately asking you, because I feel like I'm going to have to go with Volti because of that last game. But who would you all pick as a player of the match for that game? There was a lot of different incredible plays coming out on both sides, but who would you guys pick?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's got to be Volti, just for the sheer ability to stay alive at the end, recognize exactly how to play off of those rooftops to take down every special that Graveyard Shift was throwing there at the end. You know, they took down the Tri-Strike, which would have painted their zone. Then they took down the Booyah Bomb. A little bit of a panic Booyah Bomb just to try and get some paint up, but still Volti with, you know, the sense to just pop their Zuka. That was the only way that a carbon roller of all weapons could take down a Booyah Bomb by themselves. So Volti with the quick thinking there to really put the team on their back and secured that victory. But I mean, throughout the entire day, I think a lot of the players on Alliance Rogue really showed their worth and how good they are when they play together as a team.
I think I'll match what I did in set 1. I kind of went along with the player of the match last time, and I'll do the same because I think Volti truly deserves it. And also mention my honorable mention for this one from the losing team, this time Graveyard Shift, and that being Obito. You know, there was a lot in the narrative perspective coming into this match about Obito. We saw the interview about how they really wanted to play Machine, but they were mostly on that vanilla splash. You know, before in week 1, they had played more of like the splatter shot, and we got to see a little bit of you know, that play style, I think, come out a little bit, especially the previous clip before this one on Inkblot Art Academy, where they're right under the basket and they are able, even with the decently short range of the vanilla splash, and the splash is a weapon, get a couple of picks that Orion was then able to follow up on. It stalled out the time for the rest of their team, Orion specifically, to come back, get that third pick, and allow them to continue that push basically from 100 to 0. It's plays like that that are on weapons that you have so many people who are meta conscientious playing in the current day. It's hard to stand out when everyone is playing the same weapon that you are. Obito really showed that they were able to do that with such a popular weapon today.
Absolutely. I think there was definitely star-studded plays coming from both sides, especially from Obito. Both teams battled through a lot. There were teams or matches where each of those individual teams pushed from 100 to 0 and just put the team on their back, just scored all the way until just took the timer all the way down to 0. And we're going to be able to talk with I believe Kiver from Alliance Rogue about how they felt about this match. Let me see if we are ready to wrap it up with Kiver's interview. But it's been a blast commentating, or rather hosting. It's been a good job, great job listening to the commentators who did a wonderful job. No interview today, unfortunately, but we will be wrapping it up there. Any final thoughts on on this incredible set, Walkie and Zach?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was exactly what we wanted out of a match of the week. My match of the league, honestly, definitely thus far, and I think it might be going into next week. But we have some amazing sets next week as well. Battles for possible #1 seeds going into this, and that spells a lot for who you have to play in the playoffs right off the bat. So I think all these teams are going to be really taking it seriously as we see possibly Jackpot versus Crush Soda for the #1 seed if Crush Soda can wrap things up nicely against Nightmare tomorrow, or we'll also see Alliance Rogue taking on Starburst next week if Starburst is able to wrap things up nicely against Penguin, which I think most of us think they will.
Yeah, I got to give credit where credit is due to Walkie, especially for considering this potentially the match of the league. I think it really lived up to the hype, and obviously I loved the fact that we had some expectations that were met, some expectations that were raised that went far above, and some surprises as well. Some weapons that we didn't expect to see, some dueling matches in terms of the same weapon being played, in terms of the ballpoint splatlining, and even the vanilla splash too. We had seen a good bit of the swap between Neo Splash and Vanilla Splash, sort of that one-on-one mentality. One is more for using your special, one is more for actually using the main weapon. And we got to see the double vanilla return to some folks' chagrin, and to others, they're excited to see what those folks can do at the highest level of play. So really living up to the hype, especially in match 2. Can't wait to see if tomorrow also has that high of energy and expectations lived up to.
Yes, well, as a reminder, InkTV League is going to be on at the same time tomorrow. So that will be 6:40 Eastern time tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. Same thing with next week for 2 more very exciting matches and a whole cast of characters commentating, casting, and analyzing the games. It's been a blast hosting this, and we hope to see you all tomorrow, same time. Have a good one.